Welcome to OverBoost 54. OverBoost is a podcast interview series featuring discussions with speedrunners about their history in speedrunning and gaming and the runs they're passionate about. I am your host, PMC Trilogy, and with me today is Heinki. Heinki, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you very much, and hello.
So, I always like to start these off with some current events. And I feel like the biggest current event for you right now is kind of, I think you just marked recently, I was looking at your Twitter timeline, 100 days of parenthood. And this is a good thing to dive into. My past few guests have all been college students, which there's nothing wrong with being a college student. You know, shout outs to Kona and Mifa and some of the other people I've had on recently. But, you know, I also really like getting into speedrunning at various stages of life because, you know, parenting does take time, but also I know people who are speedrunners, you know, and fit that into their life somehow. Another one that comes to mind is Yelzriak, who is the Marble Madness speedrunner, who has been to GDQ, who has gotten partnered on Twitch recently, you know, who's done all these things and also has, you know, a daughter that he cares very much for. And so I wanted to check in with you, you know, just to ask how is gaming and speedrunning hanging around in your life after, you know, 100 days of learning what parenting is like? And also, congratulations, by the way. I mean, too. That's also important.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I guess it's more time consuming, of course. Like, you're 24 hours sitting with your daughter, especially at the early stages, taking care of her and playing with her, doing things like, it's even like with work. The first 3 weeks I took off from work so I can just spend time with the family and get used to being a father. And obviously it is very different and interesting. Like, before I did not have always time to sit in front of a computer and play games. And now it's like, okay, 4 days ago I couldn't even sit in front of a computer unless it was for work. And now I'm sitting in front of a computer. I'm like, I have finally time. So it is like really cool. Like when you have the time and you can just enjoy playing games, doing some runs, and then just go offline, and then back to being a father, so, or a parent in this case. So it's really cool. I enjoy it definitely.
Do you feel like you can see? I mean, obviously, right now you're dealing with the early stages of taking care of a child, and I haven't had that experience myself, but from talking to friends, you know, kids develop pretty rapidly over the first you know, few years, and so I imagine this will change, but. One thing I wanted to ask is that because, you know, there might have been times in your life when you could have maybe dumped some amount of time into learning a game like Deus Ex or Tiberian Sun or something like that. Do you feel like you're going to look at that differently now? Like, do you think you're going to be less likely to pick up new games, or do you think you're going to be, you know, have a different approach? Maybe like take more notes or something like that if you're trying to learn a new game?
I guess it's kind of like a mixture. Like, yes, I would probably look up stuff more before I do them. Like, just make notes, how do glitches work if they're tutorials, watch the run themselves multiple times so that I'm kind of prepared, that kind of like dry practice, so that before I actually do it, I already have all the notes and the theory in mind, so that when I sit in front of the computer, I can try to execute them immediately and remember most of the patterns. Now, like, that is, I think, the approach I do normally now. Like, even if there are like changes in like older runs, like in Human Revolution or Deus Ex, like I always look in through the runs whenever I have time, like on YouTube, on my phone, just to see like, okay, this is the new strat, so I know what to do, put them in my to-do list, and then when I have the time, I'll just try to copy them. And if I have issues, I already know where to look for, or I can just contact the people who already executed those glitches, and then I can just ask. But besides that, I think that would be the strategy would be the same, depending on the time, of course. Like,
sure.
Normally, I just look up a tutorial or I just stream how I'm learning it, and the people who are interested like join and just give hints or tips whenever something is not done correctly. So I mostly try to do it this way, but obviously it depends. Like, when my wife has time and she says like, yeah, okay, I can take care of her, I'll do it. If there is no time, then I'll just do it like the dry practice.
Yeah,
so
no,
all the information.
I think that makes sense a lot. One of my best buds who helps we co-host another podcast. I think he might be around the same mark you are, maybe like 2 months instead, like a little behind you. But hearing him talk about what he can do. Obviously he's not streaming, so it's easy for him to pause Resident Evil 8 and and take care of it as needed, as opposed to streaming, which is a little different because maybe you can take breaks, but generally you want to be somewhat active, somewhat present. But also you brought up another point though, even besides finding resources that you can look at while you're taking care of your child, was also the point that you're connected into a social network of speedrunners generally, specific communities, but also broadly, even if you were doing a game that no one had done before, you would probably have people who know speedrunning watching you, and that can help for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Like, there's the group, like, they're famous from ESA for the Awful Games blog. Like, I have a lot of contact with those friends of mine, and they always just pick up a new game, and then they just utterly destroy it because nobody was running it, and they're like, what the hell? What kind of game did you find, and why are we running it? It's like always hilarious to see and watch it, and I love that. So even in terms like when it's a complete new run, I would just say like, hey, you guys want to destroy it with me, and they would just completely take it apart. So it's always hilarious to watch, especially when I look at the marathons when they prepare those runs and then they just showcase it, and it's fabulous. I love it.
Yeah, no, I'm a big fan of that kind of stuff too, and I'm sure if you mentioned some of the people involved in the group, I would probably recognize a few of those names. I've always I think maybe my favorite segments of ESA marathons are those awful game relays. I truly beautiful pieces of work, all of them. Shout outs. All right, let's go back in time a little bit. One of the things I like to start with, of course, I like to do this as sort of chronologically as possible, and
Sure.
I'm going to ask you now, what is your origin story with gaming generally? Like, how does video gaming get into your life? Is it from family, friends?
The first thing I think I remember was when I had an SNES, and my mother got it for me, and I was playing Donkey Kong Country on it. It's even connected with a hilarious story. So first of all, I always deleted all the save files, like how many kids did that. So my mother was playing. So my mother was playing the games and was progressing in them, and because I couldn't read, I was just pressing every button until I got the game starting. So my mother was pretty frustrated and stopped playing the games. So she just let me play them. And the thing I remember was I was playing Donkey Kong Country. Like it's just a tiny bit of my memory, but I can't forget it. Like I don't know how old I was. My mother always tells me I was like 3-4 years old, and she wanted to cut my hair, so she distracted me by playing Donkey Kong Country, shaved my head off, and then put my hand on the hat, and it was like, my hair is gone, and I started screaming. That's all I remember from that situation. But that is like the first part I remember from gaming when I was a child.
I have so many questions about this. Okay, have you ever gone? Sure. Like, I assume 3-year-old Heinki was probably not. DKC can be a pretty hard game, so I assume you weren't beating DKC as a 3-year-old.
No, definitely not.
Have you ever gone back?
That is interesting that you mentioned it, because like after I finished studying like 6 years ago, I wanted to replay them because I remember playing them as a kid, but I never finished them. So I said with a couple of friends and said like, hey, do you want to do a Donkey Kong Country race? And so we did. So we did all 3 games, like not in one session, but we did all 3 games like one after another after like 2-3 weeks of a break in a blind playthrough, and finished them as a race. So that was some fun time I had with the game, and I really enjoyed it. It's a cool game.
Now, maybe more important, did your mother ever finish DKC?
I'm not sure. Maybe, but I kind of doubt it because I deleted her save file that often. So I would need to ask her, actually.
Oh, geez. Yeah, my wife is a huge Donkey Kong Country fan, and she's in chat there, and she's sort of.
Okay.
She also had a really, I was raised by very old parents who never really connected with video games at all. I think the closest was my father. My father claimed when I was a kid that he had played Rad Racer on the NES with my brother. But neither of my parents ever really got into it. So it's been funny to hear. I think my wife has sort of similar stories to sharing a Super Nintendo, with her parent to you. That's a good one. How about, okay, so that's a pretty early memory, of your parent kind of supplying you with some goods there. Going forward from there, what are some more memories of really connecting with games? Like, because I feel like 3 is kind of distant. Like you barely have an idea of definitely possessing a game. You don't even think of it as my Super Nintendo at that point.
Yeah. As I said, like that is like only that flash of a memory. I just remember I was doing the train track stage, and suddenly my hair was gone, and that is all the memory I remember from that scene back then. But the memory I mostly have from my childhood when I played games was on the PC, and that was Heroes of Might and Magic 3, and also like Age of Empires. So those were really the first games where I was like digging into gaming. Was like, wow, an entire new world opened for me.
Interesting. So, because I was curious, so you mentioned Age of Empires and Heroes of Might and Magic 3. One of the things I like to ask about is, when it comes to the games that people speedrun, some of those games end up being childhood games that people come back to because either they want revenge or they really do enjoy the game. And want to play it. And so looking at your repertoire, I know a lot of people, I've been saying, like, oh, I'm interviewing Heinki, who's run Deus Ex games, and people recognize that. But, one of the other videos that you sent me, and I was glad you sent it to me because I probably would have asked about it anyway, was Tiberian Sun. Was Tiberian Sun one of those strategy games that you would have played back then?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Like, that is how the history started for me. I was back then with Heroes of Might and Magic and the Age of Empires. There were so many other RTS games back then. Like nowadays, it's not that popular anymore. But the genre back then was huge. And when I started to play Command and Conquer, like Red Alert, and then there was also Battle Realms, and so many other games I have never heard of, and I was like amazed, and I loved RTS games from that point on. And so I still love to play them. It's just sadly the genre is kind of dying.
Yeah.
And back then I watched the Cody do a run of Tiberian Sun, and I was like, holy shit, this game looks amazing. I want to learn it. And when I took the time and learned it, I was like, yes, this is such a good speedrun. First of all, nostalgia, and the other one is it's just broken, and it's an RTS game, and it's like, that's my love.
Yeah, the RTS genre in the late 90s, I feel like everyone has their sort of their own. I mean, you mentioned already some of the ones that are big, Age of Empires. I was definitely like a Red Alert 2 kid. Red Alert 2 was probably the peak of RTS stuff for me. Did you ever get into playing them competitively in like a multiplayer at all? I mean, they're very difficult games to play multiplayer.
Yeah, I was playing back then like StarCraft 2.
Okay.
That was like the first time I really got competitive. I played Warcraft 3 competitively, but I was like, okay, like whenever I had the time, I did some matches with friends or against friends. That was it. But back then, when I was doing my A-levels in Germany, I started to play a lot of StarCraft 2, and I even got into the Grandmaster ranking and played against the pros. So that was pretty cool for me back then. But the problem was like, my grades started to drop, and then I had to decide, okay, do I go for my school, like do I take care of my education, or do I play more StarCraft 2? And then I started to play less and less, it got worse, and then I was like, okay, I'm gonna stop playing StarCraft. But still, that is like my biggest achievement when I think of RTS gaming. That I got to Grandmaster, I was like, yes, I'm happy now, and that's it. But when I recently played StarCraft 2 again, I just thought like, yeah, let's do some ranked. I just got into gold, and then I was like, okay, never mind. I'm too old now.
So you mentioned we just had a discussion here about PC RTS games, but it had started with with Super Nintendo console stuff. Had you kept up with console stuff at all while you were doing the PC RTS things, or are you mostly PC gamer?
That was back when kind of like an issue. My mother only could get me an SNES, and that was like the only console I had for that time being. But then my stepfather came to the family, and he had a PC, and then he was basically playing those games.
Okay.
And I was always watching him play him, and then I said like, oh, I want to try it, and he's like, sure, here you go, try it. And then he left, had to learn, had to go to the army, and I was just using his PC and just play the games. He basically introduced me into PC gaming, told me how to start the game, what to do. Like, if I remember back when I couldn't read, like I had no idea what I was doing. He was just memorizing the steps I had to do, and basically that's how I got into it.
Interesting. No, that's fascinating. I mean, it's not. I guess not surprising because I think I had an experience where I had an older sibling who like went off to college and left like a Genesis behind, like that kind of thing.
Okay.
And so that was I had some interaction with it that way. Now this is a speedrun interview podcast, so we're going to be mostly focused on single player games. But of course, I did want to ask. I already asked specifically about RTS multiplayer games. Are there other big phases for you in terms of multiplayer gaming, and that could be anything. That could be MMOs, MOBAs. I mean, certainly MOBAs are descended from RTSs anyway. Have you been into any stuff like that?
Yeah, of course. Like when I think back then, that is kind of like a funny story. Like I loved Warcraft 3, and I was playing it all with all the fun maps online, and then I went to the store with friends and we saw World of Warcraft. So every one of us thought, oh my god, it's Warcraft 4. Like we didn't know what it is. So I bought it, installed it, and was like, wait a second, this is not an RTS. So I remember it because I was really pissed. I put the game back, got it to the store and said like, what is this nonsense? I don't want this game. And then a week later I was like, but it looked interesting. So I went back to the store, bought the game, and started playing World of Warcraft.
And how long did you stick with it? I mean, are you still playing it or?
No, not really. I back when I played from the original time until the Burning Crusade.
Okay.
And so like for first add-on with a friend of mine, like my best buddy back then. And then after Burning Crusade, I stopped and I never touched World of Warcraft again until last year. But then I played Wrath of the Lich King like on a private server because I was like, hey, I missed so many add-ons. I just want to see what is there, like what is happening after I left. And so I played that game for a year last year, and then I stopped because I was like, okay, it's very time-consuming. I got my goal, which was basically finish a raid with the Lich King. We slayed him, and then I never touched the game again.
So you were not attracted at all by the Siren Song of Classic. That was not something that affected you.
No, because I played Classics too much back then, and I did PvP, I did PvE, I had all the instances already, and back then there was the ranking system with like rank 14 to 1, so that you can get good PvP gear, and I had that all of that already. I was seeing like, okay, people are looking for Classic, and I was like, I played Classic too much, I don't want to touch it. So I was like, nah, I'm looking for... But that is how I got inspired to try Wrath of the Lich King, because I was like, okay, I'm not maybe interested in Classic, but I never played Wrath of the Lich King, so let's try that one. And there we are.
No, that's interesting. I was in, I guess, high school around the time of Vanilla WoW when that was first out. I guess maybe you were too.
Yeah,
and I never played it myself, but I had a bunch of friends did, so I was like secondhand exposed. Like I know Ragnaros is in Molten Core, etc. Things like that, but without ever having played the game. And it's been interesting to see, who is stuck with retail, who's gone to Classic. I had friends playing on, on a vanilla Classic server, private, before the official Classic came out. So it's been interesting to see what people go to. I'm very entertained by that story though about Warcraft 3 and thinking that World of Warcraft would just be because Warcraft 3 was fun. I had a lot of fun with those campaigns, and also the MOBA that I played the most was Dota All Stars, of course, via Frozen Throne custom maps. You mentioned you did play some custom maps. Did you play much Dota at all?
Yeah, I played a lot of Dota.
Okay.
Like I remember there was a German gaming show back then, which was on TV, and they basically showed like every evening like new games and fun games. And one scene was like all about modding. So they were always showing mods for games and how to install them, like kind of like a guide. In official TV, and they showed like, oh hey, here are fun maps in Warcraft 3. This is how you do it. You go in online, then you download the map, and then you can play it. And then I saw Dota and was like, oh, this looks cool. I want to try it. And there I was, starting to dig into all the fun maps. There are so many. It's crazy. Like I remember spending so many weekends with friends just playing online Warcraft 3 fun maps. Because there's so many.
Oh yeah. I mean,
amazing.
Dota, of course, is the one everyone remembers now. But there was, I think the other ones like Moomoo's Adventure.
Oh, Vampirism, Green Tag TD.
Yeah. There was like the DBZ RPG was really fun.
I remember that one. That was really great. Like going the farming strat just to die and then training in hell and then go back.
Yep. Yeah, no, that was definitely
good.
an interesting time, and I think it was an interesting time too because like a lot of times you would go in and you would download the map via the in-game browser, but if you tried to do that with Dota, people had did you ever experiment with the utilities like the WC3 ban list and w.getdota.com and stuff?
Oh, I never tried those. No.
Okay.
I always used the normal browser in Warcraft 3.
Okay. Yeah, no, so w.getdota.com is just exactly what it sounds like. It was just a website where you could download the most recent map of Dota All-Stars. And at some point, the Dota culture had developed to the point where, people are, this may surprise some people, folks are quite toxic in MOBAs, that happens. And so that was true right from the start, because if you showed up to a lobby where you're trying to get people for a game of Dota, and you were downloading the map in the browser, in the custom map browser, it was evidence that you weren't serious about Dota. You weren't really in on Dota because you were downloading it inside the map browser instead of pulling it from the website. And so we would have this utility called WC3 ban list that we would use to kick people who were downloading the game in the browser, and then also they had a function where you could check the IP address for the country, and we would kick people who weren't in US or Canada because we felt their pings wouldn't be good enough. Was that actually true? Were we bad kids? There's questions that have answers that I'm not going to answer. But it's definitely interesting, to meet another person who had some insight to that. Do you have other big multiplayer games that you partook in? Other first-person shooters. I mean, it sounds like you fell off of of the Warcraft experience after Burning Crusade. What else fits in there?
Like I mostly played some co-op games and single-player games. That is what I mostly remember.
Okay.
But I also played, after World of Warcraft, I tried Tabula Rasa and then Guild Wars 2 as well. But it did not catch me as much as it was with World of Warcraft back then. But then I also realized, like, okay, maybe I'm just getting less interest in MMORPGs. So I kind of started dropping them, and then I got into Battlefield Bad Company 2. That was like my first, and also Call of Duty 4, the first game. I played a lot of multiplayer in that. And that was basically my first-person shooter experience. Like I played everything as a kid, but mostly in single player. But that was like where I got into multiplayer. And obviously, when I was at friends' places and they had an Xbox, we were like pulling up the Halo experience and just played against each other. Also, like other games, like I remember one friend of mine still has the PlayStation with the 4-controller module, and we were playing Crash Team Racing against each other. Like even that wasn't too long ago. Well, I mean now it's long ago, but like 11 years ago, like we still put that module on, put it on the TV, and we were like so fascinated because it was pure nostalgia. But it was amazing. Like it's really cool. But yeah, that was mostly my experience with multiplayer games, or especially online. Sure.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. It's evolved a lot, and we certainly, I think that what we've talked about has covered that. All right, so you mentioned earlier when we were talking about RTSs, you mentioned StarCraft 2, and something I have noticed with StarCraft 2 in particular is that it was the gateway for a lot of folks when it came to discovering Twitch and live streaming. How did you discover streaming? Was it StarCraft 2? Was it something else?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
It was basically that. Since I was playing many matches online and I started to play against pros, so I always first of all, there was the replay mode, so I watched that, but I also wanted to know what is the pro saying against me, or what can I improve on. So back when it was on own 3D TV, that was like the thing.
Yeah.
And they were streaming there. I mean, they did like a dual stream to Justin TV and Own 3D TV, and I always watched them there, especially when I played against them, since their names were quite famous back then. Like I remember I was playing against Stefano and Muslim. And
I recognize those names. I'm not even a StarCraft fan.
Yeah, and just to spoil, I lost against both of them after 40-50 minutes, but it was quite a cool experience to play against these pros and recognize those names, and was like fangirling. I was like, oh my god, what did they say about my skills? Like, what do they think about me, and so on. It was really cool, and I remember always checking their names and watching them. But then, maybe because I was scared since I was young, I was like, 18, 19 around that time. So I was, 1920, never mind. I can't count. But I was always scared to make an account back then.
To make a Twitch account or an own 3D account? Or?
On 3D and Justin TV, because I thought like if the pros realize who I am, then I get attacked or such. Like I was like kind of paranoid. So I was like, okay, I'm not gonna make an account, but I'm gonna watch them and see the past broadcast, and then I can see, okay, what did they say? What can I improve on? And this is how I basically also found about live streaming, because I wanted to improve and started watching the streams.
No, that makes sense. I mean, this is, as you could tell, I've heard this sort of thing before. I know some other folks. One of my best speed buds, KZ Fru. I think a major entry for him into learning about Twitch and live streaming was, his interest in StarCraft 2. So certainly, something that's come up before. Now you mentioned, working up. Sort of developing the confidence, to get an own 3D account. Did you say at the end there that you did eventually get a Twitch account also via your interest in StarCraft 2?
Yeah, well, not only in StarCraft 2, but back then whenever I wanted to watch something on Twitch, I just looked on the front page or through certain game sections to see if those streamers are live.
Right.
And that is how kind of the connection to speedrunning comes, because there was Lag TV back then, which did StarCraft 2 videos, and they also did like When Cheese Fails, and I love to watch that. And there's the guy called Maximus Black who did I Want to Be the Boshi, and I played I Want to Be the Guy before, so I was like, oh hey, this looks like I didn't know about fan games back then, so I thought like, oh, it's like a sequel again, kind of like Warcraft 3 and World of Warcraft. So I was like, okay, I'll check on I Want to Be the Boshi, and then I found a speedrunner called Kale Mandu in 2013 who did runs of it, and I was like, what is it? I don't know. It has a lot of viewers. It says something speedrun. Let's watch it. And that's how I got into speedrunning afterwards. And then I decided, okay, this is cool. I don't want to always check the game and see if he's live. I want to see him and join the chat. And that is when I decided to make an account.
Okay. Yeah. So, this was my guess. This was, if you had made me guess, I would have guessed that you would have been, on live streaming, checking out streams, and you would have seen a speedrunning event in some form. It's interesting to me, though, that, the most common answer, and this surprises exactly no one, is that someone sees a GDQ event, usually maybe a GDQ VOD on YouTube, or they happen to catch it live on Twitch. But in this case, you're able to trace it to the fan game community. I didn't know too much about them. I had Wolsk on a few months back, who's very much into that, and I learned way more about fan games than I knew previously, which was a lot of fun. Shout out to that community.
Yeah, the community is really great. That is how I got into speedrunning, and then I just started watching all the fan game speedrunners, like there was Stinky, there's Denferok, there's Kelmandu back then, there's Wolf, there was Shadow back then. So many people I remember, Greaser, and it was really cool. I love to watch that, and this is how I then later on found more speedrunners, found Speedruns Live, and started watching from there. And then I found ESA and GDQ and watched those events as well, and it just started to snowball.
Now, would you have been someone? This is a great moment in time. There was a moment in time when it used to be the best way to find live speedrun streams on Twitch was to go to the front page of SRL. Would you have done that?
Yes, I literally did that because there was no tag system, and if you followed the people who did speedruns, you would know that they're live. And so through Keomandu, I found like, okay, there's Speedruns Live. Everyone, because back then everyone was linking to Speedruns Live to say like, hey, there's speedrun content. If you want to find other runners, if you want to find other games, you can go there. And this is how I found more and more people afterwards. Like the second person I found was Enop, who did Majora's Mask, and I was like, oh hey, Majora's Mask, one of my favorite Zelda games, so I started watching him. And then I found Joshimus, who did San Andreas back then, and I was like, oh hey, there's someone doing San Andreas, and then S, and it just started to continue like that.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's certainly some of the early names, and a lot of those people folks are still around. I mean, I'm pretty sure like Enop still does his thing. Josh is certainly... I mean, now running VCS at the moment, of course, but I think I just noticed, I could have sworn I saw on Twitter earlier that, okay, this is right. That as of to the day of recording, Josh's Twitch account is 10 years old. So there you go. I guess we've been at this for a while. That's funny. So okay, so you're discovering speedrunning, you're on SRL, that was the place to be to discover, especially new streamers, because as you mentioned, you could follow people and see when they were live. But if you were trying to find more, and certainly, it was still nascent at the time, so you wanted to find more because even the few people you would find weren't live all the time. What pushes you over the edge to do your own speedrun? What's the story there?
Yeah, so it starts with Josh and S. So basically, back then, they were known for GDA. So everyone who kind of knew speedrunning knew they were doing San Andreas. And back then, I was always watching them. And suddenly, they do a Human Revolution race, like of Deus Ex. And I was like, hold on, this is one of my favorite games. I like that. And I started watching them. And they did the race. I remember watching Josh, who failed like at the product start, so he died to the guards, and then he was like, yeah, whatever, I'm not gonna do it. Then he rated S, and then I continued watching S doing the entire run, and was like, oh, that is super cool. And that was the moment I said like, I want to try that. Like, I didn't know that someone runs Human Revolution. And then I started to dig up everything, like I remember messaging Josh and S and asking like, hey, how does it work? What do I need? And everything like that. And then S linked me to SDA and said like, yeah, you can find your resources. And I remember watching S run back then and just copying him one by one to learn the run. And that's how I started in 2013. So that was really cool. And later on, we also did races against each other, and I started to get into the community. Oh, it was really cool.
Now, at the time, so you're saying you're crossing that threshold of doing your first run in 2013. You're doing a PC game run, so we don't have to have a discussion about what capture hardware you're using in 2013. I pour one out every time I have that discussion with someone because it's always a nightmare. What kind of software are you using at the time to do the capture, though? Were you XSplit, OBS, or something else?
I used OBS back then because people said like, yeah, if you want to start streaming, like I remember S telling me like, yeah, just get OBS. It's for free. It's easy to handle. I was like, okay, sure. So I started playing around with that and started streaming with this to Twitch then. And everything else, I just kind of started to dig in, figure out how it works. And that's how I just started. I was like, okay, just get the game and start running half the splits. Back when it was not, I didn't use W splits. I used Landfair.
Oh, Landfair. Okay.
Yeah. Because I asked about it, and they said like, yeah, everyone is use W split, but Landfair is a new thing and it's cooler. So if you want to try something new, try that. And I was like, okay, sure, I take Landfair then. And I used that for almost the entire decade until live split was a thing, and then I switched over. But I had some great experience with that. Started to figure out, because I had already 2 screens since I was studying IT back then. I was like, okay, let's try figuring out how to do a layout, everything in window mode, and that's how I go until now. So.
No, I hear you. I definitely. I think I was also prompted by my workplace to get into a dual monitor lifestyle, and so whenever I think I didn't really, I had been streaming on and off random things since 2014, and in 2016 was when I finally started speedrunning myself. But you know, having the extra real estate sure does make it manageable. Certainly. Okay, so we have confirmed Human Revolution was the first one that you did speedruns of. That was your official first game speedrun. This is about the point when I like to do a bunch of sort of individual rapid fire takes. And first game, we got the first game speedrun. Of all of the speedruns that you have done, what is your favorite? And when I ask that, I mean like what speed game, not like an individual instance of a run, but like what's your favorite one to do that you have the most fond memories of?
I would say it's still Human Revolution, but Deus Ex is very close to it. Like both those games. And when I think of recently, like in the last 2 years, then it's definitely Tiberian Sun, because it was like childhood memory combined with speedrun and amazing glitches. So I was like, okay, this is my new love.
All right, I'll have more questions about those later. But while we're doing this lightning round, got to get the flip side. What is a game that you did a speedrun of and you did not enjoy it? You're like, probably not coming back to this one. It might be my least favorite speedrun that I've done.
That is actually tough, because I still enjoy doing the games I run. But I think it will take, like, maybe not from I did not enjoy, but more like of I don't have time to do a run. That would be San Andreas.
Yeah.
Because it's just way too long. Like, back then, it was the time when duping was found. Okay. I learned the duping strats, and every week, every time when I did a run, I was like, oh, hey, we found a new route, which is saving 30 minutes. And then the next week, it's like, oh, another 30-minute save. And it just continued, and duping strats changed. And I was like, okay, I'll leave the game for now until everything's discovered, because I don't have the time to learn it all over again. But I think now it's kind of stable around 5 hours, but I think 5 hours streaming while my daughter is screaming in the background is gonna be a bit tough. So
yeah, I mean that's the thing, especially with a game like San Andreas, is that you know you can look at the very top level of the the no arbitrary jump in script category, and that's like I think it's like under 4 hours now, but you don't become a top San Andreas runner overnight. You have to budget 5 or 6 hours, you know, even if you've practiced segments, even if you know you've done all that work, because it's just it's not going to happen on Mac. It's a beast of a game. I last year I tried learning the Los Santos segment, and I had a little bit of fun with it, but like I was like, nah, I can't do the whole thing. I'm out. Sorry. How about? Oh, go. Yeah, more.
No, I just wanted to say, like, I think most people, when they get into San Andreas, they only learn the Los Santos segmented, and then after that, they either say, like, okay, I continue learning everything, or they say, like, nah, I'm not gonna do it. But it feels like always like that.
Yeah, but that's a good approach, though, right? For a longer game, is like, there's no reason you're gonna make it worse for yourself to attempt to learn it all in one go when it's a very long run, you know, rather than breaking it up into segments. Like, that's good practice for anything in life, is, you know, breaking it down into manageable chunks.
Yeah.
How about a game that you would like to speedrun, but you have not gotten around to it yet, whether for time reasons or it just doesn't fit with what you're doing right now?
I guess there are 2 games which I have in mind, but both have the same engine. That would be Quake and Daikatana. Like, back when I watched Elgu and Sphere JM. No, it's MJ, sorry. Sorry for butchering your name. No, but those 2, they always do, like, Quake runs. Back when Elgo did a lot of Half-Life and Half-Life 2, but then he switched to Quake. And Sphere always does the Star Trek game, I forgot what it's called, and also Quake and Daikatana. And I always watch those
It's the Voyager one, right? The Voyager?
Yeah,
okay.
exactly, the shooter one.
Yes.
And Yeah, also played that as a kid, and I was scared of the first scene. I remember that. But side story, and I always like to watch those runs, and I find them so amazing, especially with the tricks. And I was like, okay, I definitely want to learn Daikatana. I definitely want to learn Quake, but I just don't have the time, and I would need to learn the movement as well, and I would need to look it up. I guess there are tutorials for that, and it's not a problem if I just ask them about that, but I'm just like, okay, I'll just pick it up if I really have the time, and then I just go into it.
Cool though. I mean, I think the good news there though is that, you know, compared to say San Andreas, Quake and Daikatana are at least like reasonable projects. You know, still a lot to learn. But I've watched a little bit of the Daikatana run. I never played that game myself, but it's kind of, I don't know, there's something about a flop that fascinates me. I don't know if you're the same way, where you see a famous flop and you're like, oh, I gotta play that.
I mean, Daikatana, I never played it. I just heard the rumors about being a bad game and with the AI being horse shit. But then I saw the run at ESA, and I was like, damn, this looks like fun. Like, especially when you use the crossbow to boost yourself up and go out of bounds and on the wall and everything. I was like, damn, this is really cool. And so I thought, like, yeah, why not just try it? Like, it looks like fun.
Do you have a favorite speedrun to watch that you have no plans to run yourself?
Yes, that would be Fury. Or Fury? No, Fury, I think. The boss battle game, which is kind of like Devil May Cry. So you have like only boss battles one after another. It's like an indie game, and it's amazing. Like I remember playing it myself and enjoying it. And when I saw the speedrun, it's so cool to watch it, like when they have to do everything in quick sessions or counter attack dash and do this in the middle of the boss fight, and just to immediately go through one boss to the other. It is really cool. Also, the music was amazing, so I was like, damn, this is a game I really enjoy watching, but I don't think I will touch it.
No, that's extremely fair. That's cool. I have not heard of that game before. That's you said it's an indie game that came out like a few years ago, or?
I'm not sure when it came out, but it got recommended to me from one of the speed friends, and he said like, yeah, it's a cool fighting game. Yeah, and then I was like,
okay, thank you. All right, Chad has rescued me.
It was a few years ago. Okay, never mind.
I was just trying to search FURY on the internet. I was like, there's no. Is it Fatal Fury? That's not it. No. Okay.
Yeah, it is really cool. As I said, like I enjoyed the gaming. It's basically the Devil May Cry, but only boss fighting and with different phases. And after I finished it, I watched the speed and I was like, damn, that is really cool. And it was also in multiple GDQs. Like when I think of back when, I forgot his name. No, I'm getting old. Never mind. But two people did recently runs at GDQs, and I enjoyed watching them also in private when I see them on Twitch, and it's fascinating. I really like to see this fast movement, fighting-based speedruns.
Yeah, no, that's cool. That's dope. I mean, and also shout outs to. I feel like I'm always really happy when I see the big marathons show off indie games as well. Like that's just always neat to see. Speaking of big marathons, I got one more individual game question for you, which is I always like to ask that you're no stranger to ESA or GDQ. You know, you've done a lot of runs at both events, and I wanted to ask, do you have any runs in your repertoire that you really, really want to show off at an event like that, but you have not yet had the opportunity? Because I mean, so you've done all your Deus Exes at these events. You've done some other things as well. Like I think I saw like, cluster truck, stuff like that. Yeah. Is there another game where you're like, hey, if I could get an automatic into the next ESA or GDQ, I'm gonna do this game?
Yeah, there were two actually, and I'm very happy. One actually got in by another runner, which I didn't know, and I'm very looking forward to that. That would be Tomb Raider Anniversary. Okay. It's a fun game to run. For ESA, there's normally Kataref doing the runs of it. He's really good in the game and a good friend of mine. And because he's much better, I just don't submit it because I know, like, hey, he's the better person to run it, and I'm just going to do co-commentating. But for GDQ, it always got denied for a while, and I thought, like, I want to see that be in the marathon. It always got denied, but now it got in. And for GDQ also, I want to get in Tiberian Sun just to showcase, hey, Command and Conquer really cool run, and also pretty broken. Especially since there have been many RTS speedruns recently, like with King Dime doing StarCraft, Covered Muffin doing Warcraft 3. So it's really cool to see that other people are also pushing the RTS genre. Also, there was MH who did Age of Empires individual levels as a showcase.
Yeah, no, I agree. I would definitely be extremely hyped to see literally any Command and Conquer games. You know, I actually I wonder right now. Now you're gonna make me search live on air. Has a Command and Conquer? Does GDQ VODs take ampersands? Let's find out. Oh, okay. Red Alert 3 was in. That's the only one. Yeah, so yeah, that's right. Railcoon and Covert Muffin.
Oh yeah,
did a Red Alert 3 co-op.
The co-op run.
Yeah,
the co-op run with cinematics. Exactly. Yeah, I remember that.
God, what Red Alert's so good at cinematics. But yeah, certainly. I mean, Tiberian Sun, for the reasons you already mentioned. You know, the glitches in particular are really, really fun. They make the routes for the levels really, really interesting. So hopefully, you know, we can see that in the future. You know, maybe at I don't know how I don't know how parenting is going to affect your ability to travel, but certainly I would love to be in the audience. You know, for a Red Alert.
I mean, we kind of thought. We obviously didn't know how the situation is, but in Germany, in Potsdam, there was supposed to be a marathon happening in the end of April because the numbers looked fine.
Yeah.
And I already talked with my wife and said, like, hey, what do you mind if we go for a family trip with a little girl to over there? And she said, like, yeah, sure, we can go as a family. And the same with ESA. I wouldn't mind to go for GDQ with entire family, but just then I need to check out how things with visas go on because of a minor and with wife because she needs to get a visa as well. And the process will be a bit more complicated, but for the European countries, it's very easy. It's just go there. That's it.
I mean, hopefully everything goes as smoothly as possible. I feel like it has been my experience. I know we talked a little bit about parenting at the top, but I've definitely... I want to be respectful of people's personal preferences, and I have noticed that some parents are totally down to travel with their young children, and some aren't. And I'm not here to bully people one way or the other. I have a friend who, you know, who has made several trips with toddlers flying from America to India, and that's a long haul, right?
Yeah, that is quite amazing. Like, I mean, I can totally understand when parents say like, hey, I don't want to travel with a toddler.
Yeah.
I feel the same because my wife is from Malaysia, and when we want to visit her parents, it would be like around like a 17-18 hour flight, and I don't feel confident going there with like a toddler. Maybe if she's like 1, 2, 3 years older, then we could try it, but not in the early stages. But if we're going for a short trip like ESA or Potsdam, which is just like a drive for 3 to 4 hours, or just flight for less than an hour, I would say like, yeah, that is not a big deal. Like, just get on the plane, let her sleep, get out, and she's awake, and then easy peasy, no problem.
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, it's certainly just, you know, it's something to experiment with as well. And, you know, hopefully, I mean, I feel like right now we are all feverishly daydreaming of post-COVID world, you know, and hopefully the daydreams come true and not the fevers. So we'll see where that goes. Well, you know what, on that note, we're talking already about health stuff. One of my regular questions is already, I ask everybody, do you do anything when it comes to wrist hand health? You know, because playing video games, especially speedrunning, has a lot of repetitive motions. Now, I know you have a lot of athletic stuff going on in your life, but let's talk about just the computer touching part of it, because you're an IT, you do IT, you do speedruns. Do you do anything in particular when it comes to health at the desk?
I mean, the thing is, because I'm doing martial arts since I'm 6, I kind of have like sports in my daily routine already like I train daily, and because I'm doing martial arts, there's like a lot of preparation for wrist, hands, strengthening for arms and joints and everything. It's already included also with stretching. But when I think of like on the desk, like most people start just sitting down. I mean, normal nowadays it's becoming more a thing of to get the movable desk so that you stand up,
Yes.
that you're standing a bit. Like what I can always suggest is get one of those gym balls and sit a bit on that. Like maybe not like me who's like constantly sitting on it, but just for 10 minutes or something. And what you always can do is like do like these kinds of stretching, like even sitting on the desk or standing up, like, or even if you get a cup of tea or coffee, or if you take a toilet break, you can always do something for your hands just to loosen them up, because most people are really getting stiff with them. So I would suggest those. And yes, I do them as well, but I do it normally during training when
Sure.
I warm up. Then like 15 minutes warm up, 15 minutes stretching with preparation, and then I start weight training, weapon training, sparring matches, and so on. So everything's included.
So
It's basically a must.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. No, especially, as we're, I guess for now, I'm in my early 30s at least. You don't have to dox yourself. I think you're a similar age though.
Yeah, 29. So.
Okay, there you go. All right, I'm still older. Hooray! Yes. This is me. Whenever I see anyone in Twitch like, oh, I'm gonna be 30 soon. I'm like, yeah. So what, brother?
I mean, for me, the free is coming closer, but it's still a year away.
But I wanted to ask, because I've probably been following you on Twitter for a while, or watched your streams for a while, and I've seen things. The ball is not anything new. I've seen you sitting on that for a long time. And so I just wanted to get a quick overview, because people are probably curious. Can you give a quick summary of the martial arts stuff that you do? Are you involved in a particular style? It seems like you travel to compete. That's the impression I get. So maybe you can give people who are like me, who has never participated in any martial arts, like, what does that consist of, and what have you done?
All right, so I will just try to describe it as fast as possible.
Okay.
So basically, I'm in the national Wushu team in Germany, and the sports we do is Wushu, which is basically Kung Fu, which people know from the movies like Jackie Chan, Jet Li, and so on. And what is different there are two different types of Wushu. One is basically like a form area where you have like a carpet of 8 by 30 meters. And on that, you have to imagine it like ice skiing. You have your routine with different difficulties, and you do it in front of judges. Like in this case, there are 9 judges, and you have to do stances, you have to do jumps, you have to do difficulties, and you have to combine them, and for that you get a rating. The other part is called sanda, which is basically fighting. So you have it like kickboxing, but in addition with judo throws. And you're also fighting on like a 1.3 meter high stage. And there are no boundaries, so you can literally throw your opponent off the arena. This is basically the history in China back then. When they did those fights, they were for dead or alive. So if you got thrown out of the ring, you die because there's spikes. And they kind of took that as a rule without dying. So if you get thrown out of the arena twice without your opponent, you also automatically lose that round.
Okay.
And yeah, I do both of those. I do the forms basically for international championships, and the national ones only for fighting, because the forms are fine. If you do them internationally, like, you're not gonna get hurt, you can just prepare properly, and that's okay. But the fighting can be very brutal on international area, because you are fighting against pros, and I'm just an athlete who's doing that as a hobby. Like, I'm doing it part-time from working, studying, being a parent and such. And in Germany, this martial art is not famous, it's not popular. So every time I go for tournaments, I have to pay on my own, for example. And because I'm working in IT, it's not a problem, but for many other athletes it is.
Oh yeah,
and
certainly.
And if I think of a Russian team, for example, who is getting sponsored by the Russian country, who are putting 100 millions into just the arena where they do the tournaments, it's just insane. And if you fight there, well, I think it's not gonna be good. It's gonna be tough, at least. Like, not that there's no chance, but it's a very high level, because those guys train 8 to 10 hours a day, while I'm just training, well, it's still a lot, but like 2 to 3 hours a day, but it's still nothing in comparison.
Sure. No, it's. How did you? I forget. Did you go over how you got into this? Like, can you get a quick? Because it's it was just something that you had done from a very young age. This particular style.
I started when I was 6 with Kung Fu because my uncle started to have his own martial arts club. And basically I started with that. And back later on with 12, 13, my stepfather found out about Wushu. And that's how we started with Wushu. He was like basically the... I forgot what the word is, but basically he created the club where I am right now, and where we train every day. He's a founder. There you go. And since then, I started doing that and continued doing it because basically everyone in my family is a martial artist besides my mother. Like I have 5 younger siblings, and they all do martial arts.
Oh, big family.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm the oldest, so it's quite a lot of burden on me as well. But that is the job of the oldest.
Sure.
But anyways, so everyone is doing martial arts since a young age, and yeah, that's how we basically started.
Now, whenever I have this opportunity to get into sort of, someone's, big hobby outside of speedrunning or big, passion project job, any mix of that, I always have to bring it back around and ask, have you found any, crossover or bleed over of how you approach speedrunning and how you approach, in this case, Wushu? Have you applied speedrunning thoughts to Wushu?
Yeah. That is what I found very interesting, because when I started doing speedruns, I mostly took the training or what I do in Wushu training into speedrunning, because it is very similar. Like, since if you have to imagine, you have, instead of like maybe a 40-minute run, you have 1 hour and 30 minutes where you have to power through your performance, and you need to do your difficulties correct, you need to do your stances correct, you need to do the techniques correct, and you need to avoid any mistakes to get a good high score, basically. And what you basically did there as well is you divide this 1 minute and 30 seconds into 4 segments, and these segments you practice, and then you try to connect them together, or you do like kind of like a full run where you do the entire thing to see like what is the problem. Like maybe the start is great and then you lose your stamina, or your focus is dropping, or maybe your leg strength is not enough. And I took that approach into speedrunning as well, where I started automatically practicing in segments before I knew that people do it that way. So when I remember of learning Human Revolution, I took the same steps. I took the first level, like basically I oriented myself on the splits as had, and then I just went, okay, I do with prologue first, and then I practice that again for like 3-4 times so that I memorize it. Then I take the next step, and then I try to combine both steps, and so on. And this is how I mostly started learning about speedruns, or that is what I applied from Wushu to speedruns.
Yeah, no, I mean, I totally believe that. It's interesting to me too. I don't have any sort of organized athletic experience. Most of my exercise is stuff I could do by myself, like lifting and cycling and things like that, which I always encourage anyone to find, what sort of athletic activity works for them. But that you would apply that, that the training principles would be applicable doesn't surprise me at all. Now, we have also, while we're on the subject of crossover between different parts of your life, what about speedrunning and IT? Because it sounds like IT is kind of what you did at school, what your day job is. Do you find yourself invoking now speedrunning too, especially because speedrunning involves, computer programs which have glitches, which have exploits. Do you find yourself at all, with crossover between IT and speedrunning?
Yeah, definitely. Like, when I think back, so most people always get like code parts or basically debug the games themselves to figure out like, okay, how is it working? And then with the knowledge about programming and how it works or what they actually did, we can kind of combine it and look into the code and then realize like, okay, collision is only calculated one way. So if you're out of bounds, you can go inbounds again without any issues, but you can't go out of bounds without doing a clip, for example. And then we know like, okay, this is the limitation of the engine. Or when I was back then a game developer with a Unity engine, I knew the flaws with the jump controller and such, and then in certain games you could basically figure it out, or basically knew, okay, if you jump on an object, your jump gets reset, and then you can just hover if you're able to drag an item and such. And I could combine my knowledge from programming into speedrunning as well, and that was like amazing because I was like, oh hey, I understand why it's working this way and what the developers did to trick people to say like, oh my god, this is a huge world, but in the end it's just a sandbox, and you know how to use that sandbox. It is a really cool feeling, and it's nice to understand the details, especially when you look into details. Like if you look, for example, like a game like Deus Ex, it's in Unreal Engine, and then you know like, okay, there are many other Unreal Engine games. Like what are the same exploits? Like safe loading, it's everywhere. It's in Unreal, it is in Deus Ex, it is in I don't know what other Unreal game right now, but you can always exploit the same engine, and it just snowballs like that. It's really fascinating to me.
Okay, so there was something that I tried to find before this podcast recording, and I was unable. Normally, searching is a part of what I do professionally, so I was kind of annoyed I couldn't find it. But I wanted to ask if it actually happened, and maybe I had a fever dream and imagined it. Did you once do a showcase at ESA with a game that you made? Did I imagine that?
Yeah.
Okay, that did happen.
Okay, so that is a fun story. It was basically the same group with Awful Games blog. So back then I had to do an assignment for my game development class, and it was a Unity game. We just learned the engine, and the idea was like, hey, make a game, just try to make it like a demo and present that. And I was like, okay, sure, I'll do that. And funnily enough, I made a bet with a friend and said like, okay, let's try. We give ourselves 4 hours and try to make a game. And so we did. So I made this game called Castle Defense Alpha, and he made his side-scrolling game, and that was basically the result. And since I had to learn everything newly, like I didn't know how to do calculations for collision properly, so I just smashed something in which kind of worked. I did not think how my jumping works, so I was just like always resetting it whenever you hit, like with basically it's called like a raycast. You have to think of it like a line looking at the ground to a certain meter. So I just made a raycast until like, I don't know, like 50 centimeters or something. So every time it sees something, your jump gets reset. So if you're on a slope, it will always lets you jump. And there were so many mistakes I made. I didn't care. I just wanted to make that demo, and I gave that as an assignment. And then in the group, I said like, hey, I made my own game, and my bachelor thesis is as well in RTS, and Spatula and Pen again back then, Seductive Spatula and Pen again, they basically said like, hey, give us your game, we want to speedrun it. And this is how it happened. Like on speedrun.com, if you look for Castle Defense Alpha, you will even find the game.
Okay, there you go. All right, I was wondering how to find it. That was the thing I was looking for. All right, well, now I know. Now I know the secret. I remember catching that live, and it was a ton of fun. I really enjoyed it. So obviously it stuck with me, and I had to ask about it now.
Oh my God! Someone, I'm sorry. I'm just shocked. Someone did like a run of it 9 months ago. Like what?
Oh, active speed scene here.
Oh
yeah, wait a second here.
Why would you do that?
Oh yeah, shout outs to Guildmaster TV, who is apparently has a lot of Lego speedruns. All right, that's cool. I heard Lego games are good. This is what I've been told, so I believe it. All right. All right. Well, that was a good tangent. I'm glad I brought that up then. Well, let's talk about some of your staples then. I think we can probably move over to that. Obviously, Deus Ex is a big thing. A lot of people have seen you, at both ESA and GDQ doing Deus Ex runs. Where does that series start for you? I know Human Revolution was your first speedrun, but of course, Deus Ex, the original, is a lot older than Human Revolution. Had you played it back in the day, or?
Yeah, I played back then Deus Ex 1. I never finished it though as a kid. It was kind of the same, like just playing through it, not having any idea how it works. But I was fascinated because it was like kind of like a shooter with RPG elements. You can level, you can do it an approach and stealth. And I found stealth really cool because the other games I remember from my childhood where you had to use stealth was Splinter Cell and Tenchu. Okay. And Tenchu was kind of like not like like a mixture. And I remember I was really frustrated because I couldn't stealth there really that much. And Splinter Cell kind of introduced that, even though now that I think about it, it was kind of horrible as well. It was like pretty buggy when I think of the light system, but it was a cool introduction and I liked it. And so I thought like, okay, I will play Deus Ex and try to do a stealth approach as a kid. And I didn't get far because I was underleveled. I always died, and at some point I was frustrated when I was the first time in Hell's Kitchen and never finished it. That was my childhood experience. And then later on, when I was doing Human Revolution, I was like, okay, let's give Deus Ex another chance and learn the speedrun instead. And so I did.
So that saying that the speedrun, of course, of the original Deus Ex, but I imagine when you played, because you had mentioned that when you were discovering speedrunning, and then you saw the race with Josh and S of Human Revolution, but you had already played the game casually. You said that was one of your favorite games. So I assume you had a much more successful casual play of Human Revolution compared to Deus Ex.
Yeah, definitely. Like I really like it was when I started studying that I was playing Human Revolution for the first time, and I enjoyed it. I played it as well in stealth. I had no problem with it. Also finished the game, the boss fight, even though they were a bit unfair. But I mean, if you didn't know that you have to fight a boss and you don't have equipment for it, it kind of sucks. But there were enough environmental items which you could also use, and I used that. But I enjoyed the playthrough, and then I saw the speedrun. I was like, okay, I want to try that too. That looks fascinating and interesting. And then here we are.
So, we already kind of went into the story of how you, started with Human Revolution. When it comes to running Deus Ex, I find when talking to people that it's one thing to cross that initial threshold and learn your first speed game. But for some folks, it can take a while to open things up and to move past that first speed game. Did it take a while for you to decide to move on to Deus Ex, or did that come pretty quickly?
It kind of went pretty quickly, but also I was running Human Revolution for almost a year, and also the Director's Cut version, because in the community we differentiate both games, since the Director's Cut version has also all DLCs included and extra missions, and the original Human Revolution does not. So when I was basically running two games, even though it was kind of the same, and I basically switched between those, and then I submitted for ESA, and for the first time, all three Deus Ex games got in. Back then, it was Footbig Mike who submitted Deus Ex 1, and I submitted Human Revolution and Invisible War. And I said, like, hey, it would be cool to see all Deus Ex games at the marathon, so I started learning Invisible War. I regretted it, but I had my fun later on as well. And that was the story when I said, like, okay, I'm going to learn another game. And here's the thing. Footbig Mike couldn't come to... Was it? No. Wait. Am I mixing up? No, I think it's Footbig Mike. Maybe I'm mixing up things right now. I'm not entirely sure. Anyways, he couldn't come to the event. He had to cancel it last minute. And then I was like, oh shit, I started learning Deus Ex, but I haven't done runs that often of it. And then S encouraged me also with a Suicide Machine, who said like, okay, here you go, learn the game and show it at ESA, because there was like an open block, and I said like, okay, I'll submit it. And then I started practicing there, and that was also my first overestimate run with Deus Ex, where I couldn't do it in time, but it was a lot of fun, and that was basically breaking the threshold of saying like, okay, I'm gonna stick to one game, and then I started to just switch it, and that variation also helped. So whenever I was not getting past, or when I hit a barrier in Human Revolution, I just switched to Invisible War, did runs of that game until I hit there the barrier, went back, and then suddenly I improved, even though I didn't do anything. It's just because of that break. And it also helped me to get better in other speed games later on.
Yeah, I think that's a great thing to point out. And I see this too sometimes with folks. With someone who is trying to push themselves to do better in a single game, they for an extended period of time will grind out runs of that, and eventually it leads to frustration, and having another game to fall back to sort of I guess let your speed game muscles relax and or be restored is definitely sound advice, and it sounds like that was part of what worked out for you in terms of bouncing around between the Deus Ex games. Now, I wanted to ask, so your earliest GDQ appearance is, I think, the SGDQ 2016 with Deus Ex. Was that?
No, it was 2015 with Fume Revolution.
Oh, you're right. I'm a dummy. I see it right there. Yeah, I have it on my list. But the reason I just wanted to ask was, I went to my first time traveling for a speedrun marathon was ESA 2017, right, where I did Just Cause 3, and that was like a wild experience for me because I traveled internationally by myself, which was definitely different. When you did those trips, coming to SGDQ 2015, 2016, I forget. Were those in the Midwest at that point? Were they in Minneapolis yet, or were they still?
Yeah, they were in Minneapolis already. Because I was there now 3 times, so I kind of know the airport and was like, okay, I know this location. I know that I'm at the right scene.
Now, I know you've mentioned traveling for Wushu. Were you already pretty used to traveling? Like, because I guess what I'm asking is, like, were you used to the idea of internationally traveling to go to something like a GDQ, or was this sort of a new experience for you doing that?
It definitely was a new experience for me because I was studying for a year in Dublin, but that was just like an hour flight from Germany, so it was not a big deal. And the other trip I did before for like a training camp in China was all organized by the club, so I did not have to do anything. I just had to give my money and they got me over. But for GDQ it was the first time, and I remember sitting there reading, what do I have to do, what do I have to get. I was like a young adult, like 20 years old, and I was like, okay, I need to check now everything, like how it works, how do I get the visa, where do I need to, what is like the cheapest way to fly over, because I did not work during that time yet. I was just finishing my university time and got my bachelor, and I was like, oh shit, I don't have much money, I need to save every cent I can, and also find like roommates and such. It was a new experience, definitely, but it also opened up a scene where I was very open and said, like, I will just discover it. I will just try and figure it out. So this leads to another hilarious story from my first GDQ trip. Like, it was fine traveling over. I remember I had to fly from because I took the cheapest flight I could find, and it was like 800 euros back and forth. So I had to fly at 4 in the morning from Düsseldorf to Paris, from Paris to London, from London to Chicago, and from Chicago to Minneapolis.
Wow.
and obviously, I panicked because I had to schedule everything. Like, if the flight is not on time, what do I do? I had no idea. And I was like, okay, just please be in time. And I remember running from the airport from when I arrived at Paris, I had only 20 minutes to catch the next flight, and they started like saying like, okay, we're gonna start soon. So I remember sprinting to the next scene. I arrived in London, I had a break for 4 hours. Then from London to Chicago, I had to wait for 2 hours. Luckily, at first I thought like, oh, 2 hours is a lot, but I did not know about all the security controls and such, and because I'm from Europe, it took way longer.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, okay, so luckily everything worked out, and then I was finally in Minneapolis after 24 hours, and was like, everything worked out. So that was good.
Goodness, I couldn't even imagine. I mean, I part of thankfully I would I was traveling at the age of 27, and I was firmly into my career job at that point, so I had no qualms about saying, no sir, I'm going straight from Newark to Copenhagen, not even gonna blink an eye at this. Like, no way, no how am I getting involved in this. But I can definitely understand taking advantage of a cheaper price in exchange for time. That's just how it ends up working out. I had my eye on the SGDQ 2016 run for a particular reason, and I hope this is not embarrassing to bring up, but I wanted to bring it up to document it in speedrun history, because there's a lot of people out there who seem to think that Games Done Quick is hasty to ban people, that they are overly zealous about obscenities, etc., etc., etc. And I know this isn't true. And when I think of this not being true, I always think of your SGDQ 2016 run where you dropped an F-bomb and did not acknowledge it, and one of your couch members acknowledges it. Is there anything going on in the background? Do you think about this a lot? You obviously remembered it, because I could tell you remembering it as I brought it up. But what is the legacy of this? Do you have anything that you would want to add? Besides, obviously, GDQ does not ban people for this, since you've been to GDQs plenty of times since this happened. Take a sip.
It is hilarious because like with speedrun friends, it was always like a running gag after that run. Like I remember going into friends' streams and they're like, "Oh hey, here's the banned runner." I'm like, "Fuck you!" it was pretty hilarious. So okay, so what is the story behind it? So the first thing I remember, I never really practice when I do a run. So I just. Whatever comes in my mind, I will just say it without thinking beforehand. And just if I think something is funny or could be cool, I just explain it or just make a joke about it. And there is a scene at the start of a run, like 10 minutes in, where an agent is telling to Mandalay, like, just fire that arrogant son of a bitch. So I didn't say anything during that time because I was like, yeah, I don't know what to say. I heard that sentence and then I said like, he swear, ban him. That was the first flag. People I remember my coach was like, "Ooh, Heinki, what are you doing? Like you should have done that."
Yeah, don't.
I just thought of it as a joke and found it hilarious.
Okay.
So I didn't care. I just continued. And then later on, without thinking about it, I dropped the F-bomb when I said like, "Oops, I fucked up."
Right, because I did. That's also for people who know Deus Ex but maybe haven't watched this run. It's an intentional goof because it's the mission. It's the mission where you're supposed to rescue the woman, right? And then you can just skip the mission by blowing her up and and leaving. And so it's an intentional goof. It isn't like you made a mistake or something and had to reload. It's like, oh, this is a goof.
Yeah, exactly. So I made a joke about that without, like, I was thinking the entire time, don't swear, just try to hold it back. And then I accidentally said it. I said, oops, I fucked up. And then I remember people behind me like, ooh, like Heinki, what are you doing again? Like, stop it. And that was the time when someone from the moderation team told me like, Heinki, please be careful of the words you use. And I was like, hold on, I don't know that voice. Who is that? So I was looking around and was like, hey, what's happening? I looked back and everyone in the couch was like anciently pointing like, there, Tech, look at Tech. I was like, oh shit, okay, never mind. And then they waved at me. I was like, okay, I should pay attention to what I'm saying.
Yeah, for folks who maybe aren't, haven't done something in an environment with a very professional sound setup, it is, possible for them to pipe something into the runner's ears without the audience hearing it. And so, that does happen at these events. Again, it's not a problem. As you mentioned exactly what they said. They're just like, hey, you lost focus. You said it. It's fine. Don't worry about it. It's nothing. Not the the some people's portrayal of GDQ, but that's funny. Obviously we can all laugh about it now. So, but I just wanted to. I had to check in on that because I think I'm pretty sure I saw that live, and I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah, I remember Villagen coming to me after the run. He was like, hey, great run, but why did you swear? Like, come on. And I was like, yeah, sorry. Like, I remember even making a joke on that on stage, like behind the stage after I went from the stage. I was like, yeah, sorry, please don't ban me. And he's like, get out of my face or I will really ban you. And I was like, okay. But we were just joking at that point. But everything was cool. Nothing happened. But I remember people starting to defend me and say like, why did you ban him? And I was like, the next day I was like, wait, what happened?
Well, yeah,
like,
nothing.
why are people saying that I'm banned? And then Villagen, the next day I met Villagen, is like, Heinki, what did you do? Why did you swear so often? I'm like, I swear twice. I'm sorry. I didn't think of it. And he was like, it's okay. You're not banned. Everything's all right.
Yeah.
Like, okay.
Yeah. I mean, that's the first lesson, folks, is that if someone claims that someone is banned from GDQ, like, don't believe them. It's like often true. But no, that's fun. That was fun to cover. A question I had too. You've now done a few of these games, multiple times at these events, and you've done Human Revolution multiple times. You've done the original Deus Ex multiple times. I wanted to ask, do you always submit all of the games every time, or do you have like a strategy to your like, now it is time once again for Human Revolution?
I don't really have a strategy. I just submit all the games I run during that time. So basically with Gdq, I also submitted all the Deus Ex games like Mankind Divided, Human Revolution, Deus Ex 1. And I also added Tomb Raider Anniversary and also Tiberian Sun. Before I submitted Metal Gear Rising, for example, but when I stopped running it and I'm pretty out of the loop, so I would need to relearn everything. So I said like, okay, I won't submit it for now. But I normally just submit all the games I run normally, and then I just let people decide it. And I know that most of the time people say like, hey, okay, we had Deus Ex last year, so it won't come in this year, and I don't expect it to come in. But I just still submit it just in case people are not submitting or something like a backup run happens and things like this. The same is like with Cluster Truck, like, I mean, I can understand that people say like, okay, we only accept 5 games, because I am one of the person. I'm like, hey, here are all my games. Here are the 9 games I can run. Let me run anything. And I'm like, and there people are like, dude, calm down. Just pick 5.
But I think it's also good to point out too is that you never know. You never know what the games committee for any of these events is looking for. You know, they have an idea of what they're trying to put together, but they can only put that together if you give them the opportunity to do so. But you don't really know when they're gonna be ready again, because you don't know what their perception is of what time slots they're trying to fill, what kind of blocks they're trying to make. And so the answer, generally speaking, is just submit, just do it. Like if you'd want to do it, then the only way to make that happen is to put that submission in there. So 2 of the games that we talked about were games that had come out before you got into speedrunning. Human Revolution had been out to the point that the director's cut came out, and then of course Deus Ex has been out for quite some time. But there was another game that you mentioned that came out probably after you started speedrunning, which was Mankind Divided, which seems to have a sort of mixed reception. I feel like in the larger gaming consciousness. I think it's a great game. I had a lot of fun. Mankind Divided. I threw every refrigerator in Prague into every courtyard, and that's how they knew I was there.
Yeah.
What were your feelings about Mankind Divided generally, and then how did it go as a speedrun game?
So I think Mankind Divided also is a great game. I enjoyed it as well when I was playing it casually. I think the part people are upset about is the story, and I can totally understand that point. Like if you compare it to Human Revolution or Deus Ex 1, the level or what people expect is pretty high, so I can understand that people are frustrated. And I mean, the idea behind Mankind Divided was also to divide it in 3 different games to finish the story, so that you have more content in one area and you can just explore it. And I really enjoyed the new approach that they made Prague like the main hub, instead of dividing it into Hangsha and Detroit like they did in Human Revolution. And you always come back to an area you're familiar with, but with smaller changes, like when with the riots happening, with the police stopping you to go out on the street. And I liked it. I had my fun with it, especially with the ending. Like, I can understand that people didn't enjoy that because of the story part, and I agree on the story part, but the game in general and with the new approach, I had my fun with. And obviously, how it is with speedruns and people trying to become quick and famous, there were suddenly a lot of new runners picking up Mankind Divided and saying like, hey, I want to run this. It's just brand new. And I was thinking like, okay, I'm just going to enjoy and play it casually and chill out, and then I'm going to do some routing with friends and check like what kind of bugs and glitches are there. We had also people from QA from Eidos Montreal who came into the Discord and said like, hey, we have some discoveries for the game, but we can't tell you them yet because the game is not out yet. But once it is out and we have the 2 weeks contract terminated, we can tell you everything we found out during QA. And they did. And we found some cool strats like how to dupe weapons, how to go out of bounds in the sewer system, and many, many more. And like stacking objects and hovering. It was really cool.
Wow. That's really... So one of my questions I was going to ask was, you know, as sort of especially a visible Deus Ex and you know and Human Revolution, Mankind Divided speedrunner, had you had any contact with more likely with Eidos Montreal, you know, since they're still around? I don't know if you've had any interactions with God, what's the name? Is it Ion Storm? Is that the original Deus Ex developer, or did I get that name wrong?
I think it's Ion Storm.
Right.
Yeah.
But like, so you've already answered that question a little bit in terms of QA people getting involved. Have you had any other interactions besides this? I've never heard of that before, though, of QA coming into a speedrun Discord and being like, once the contract's up, we got stuff.
Yeah, I was surprised too. I was like, oh, that is some cool shit. So they can give us intel during testing and what they found during QA, which did not get fixed, but they said like, yeah, it's low priority. We're not going to fix it.
Right.
But other interactions I had was basically just them retweeting that, hey, I'm going to do a run at GDQ.
Okay.
And another one where I was surprised, but I was like excited and found it cool, was when I officially announced on Twitter that I'm gonna be a father and that I'm getting married. And even the Deus Ex social account said like, congratulations, with like the black heart and the yellow heart from the Human Revolution design and the Mankind Divided design. I was like, damn, okay, that is cool.
Yeah, I mean, someone's got you in the list of Deus Ex community creators, I guess, or something like that.
Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah. That's interesting. Cool. That's neat too, that they especially approached it reaching out to the community. I think sometimes, you know, it can be the sort of case where you know, a social media manager will do the things like, you know, retweeting GDQ appearances and stuff like that, and that is good. It's definitely appreciated, that sort of visibility. But you know, that sort of specific effort coming into a Discord or something like that, I feel like I've seen that more often with indie games than I necessarily have with something that's, you know, a bigger. I guess is Mankind Divided AAA? Mankind Divided is AAA, right? We can call it AAA.
Yeah, it is counted as AAA. I remember that. Like with Human Revolution, it was the same because it's like a huge studio and it's also published by Square Enix.
Yeah, published by Square Enix as well.
Yeah. Okay.
I just always I'm never sure like what you know, like Square Enix I feel like is like the weirdest AAA publisher, to the point where like, are they AAA? They're AAA, but like they're also very weird. Yeah. No one names games like Square Enix. For whatever, all their games just have completely messed up names, and I love it. I never get tired of it.
Yeah, I'm a bit I don't know, like I don't mind Square Enix, but at the same time they destroyed many of my favorite games when I think of Tomb Raider or Deus Ex, like the way they say like, hey, Mankind Divided didn't do as many sales as we wanted because it's not Final Fantasy. And I'm just thinking like, of course it's not Final Fantasy, of course it's like a different genre, it's a different game, but they kind of expect to get the same impact and then they drop the project. Like when I think of Hitman, that what is the
IO Interactive?
Yeah, thank you. IO Interactive, that they dropped them off the leash and said like, okay, you get your game, do whatever you want with that. I found that a really cool move, that they allowed them to keep everything and work on it. But when I think of Tomb Raider or with Deus Ex, that they just said like, you didn't do the sales, so you're out. Like mixed. I have mixed feelings about that.
Yeah, no, I think that's extremely apt to bring up that criticism. I think Square Enix was one of a number of publishers, especially in the early 2010s, that had pretty much absurd sales goals. I feel like, I mean, this is a general problem with business people, is that instead of making ends meet, they demand exponential growth. I mean, this is a problem in publishing broadly, in journalism. You know, if you're not, you know, loading things up with all sorts of junk and achieving exponential growth, you're not really, you know, living life right. Which is why it's exciting to see stuff where, you know, people are doing more co-ops, more owned things, stuff like that. I mean, right, the thing you said about, you know, Deus Ex and Tomb Raider, I immediately think of, you know, especially because I think we've both watched GTA speedruns. You know, people love Sleeping Dogs, and Sleeping Dogs was famously a franchise that never became a franchise because It's so weird. Like they released the definitive edition, but they didn't look into that, the success that they achieved and said this is worth making a sequel. And at this point, it's too late because that studio's gone now. You can't.
Yeah.
You let the door close on that. And it's unfortunate. I definitely. I have been eagerly awaiting more news from Eidos Montreal on what they're going to do. I feel like I've seen them involved in a few small projects, but I haven't seen anything big from them, and that's it's concerning. They're a talented studio, and I hope to see something more from them soon.
Yeah, like what I wanted to edit, like there are two things. The first thing is like because of Square Enix. Like I remember one of the devs even saying like, "Hey, like anonymously, like at the end, like when 1 week before releasing Mankind Divided, Square Enix told them to put microtransactions in, and they were like, "What? Why would we do that? It's a single player game. We don't need that, and we need to fix it." And they said like, "We don't care. Put in a microtransaction system with like money and Praxis kits and maybe some other things, and we'll do that." It was the same with Augment Your Pre-Order, which completely flopped, and it was all pushed by Square Enix saying like, "Hey, you guys need to make sales, and you do that now." And it was so odd, and it's just unfortunate that Square Enix pushed that, and then it was sad. It's the same with Sleeping Dogs. I loved the game as well, and then they said like, "Oh, hey, it just made 4 million and it didn't even get to the minimum of 5 or 6 what they wanted, and because of that we're dropping it." And I was like, excuse me, but it's a hit. Like people enjoyed it and it sold many times. But this is how the gaming industry works.
Right, yeah.
And
go ahead.
Yeah. And besides that, like I'm not sure how up to date it is, but I remember the voice actor for Adam Jensen, Elias Tofelix, he made long time ago, after Mankind Divided came out and people were saying like, "Hey, when is the new Deus Ex coming out?" He mentioned mentioned Jesus Christ. He mentioned that they are still working on it, but he can't give further details.
Okay.
But I'm not sure how up to date that is, or if they actually dropped it. I think it was like in 2018 or 2019. So I don't know what is happening with the Deus Ex series, or if Mankind Divided is gonna be the last one, but I guess we will find out at some point.
Yeah, I mean, we'll just have to wait and see. I imagine a lot of these studios experienced disruptions on account of the pandemic. So
yeah, definitely.
Things are probably pushed back. Hopefully, something will happen. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. Obviously, this is definitely not an interview where I haven't played the games. I've played all. Well, I haven't played Invisible War. I played all the other Deus Ex games, so I'm definitely.
How dare you?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't finish Invisible War. I started like 10 minutes, and I was like, nope, I'm good. I don't need to actually play this.
Oh, so you played the Fall?
Okay, no, I did not play the Fall. Come on.
Okay, gotcha.
Come on. No one played the Fall. All right, no, don't. Did you? I mean, I know. I looked at your speedrun.com profile, so I know you played the Fall. Like, I know you have, but like, did you enjoy it? Did you really want to play the Fall?
I mean, even though people didn't like it, I had my fun time for 2 hours and was like, wait, that's it. But it was it was like Human Revolution. It tried to be like it. It was just, in many aspects, worse. But I was like, hey, a new Deus Ex, I'm okay with that.
All right. Well, we'll see where that goes. Let's start winding down the sort of formal part of. Actually, you know what? Actually, I did want to touch on Tiberian Sun. Now we already talked about how PC RTS was like a foundational thing for you. You played Age of Empires, played games like Tiberian Sun. When did you get into speedrunning these games, though? Like, what prompted that? I think you mentioned earlier, but I just wanted to touch on it again. How do you ended up getting? Because Tiberian Sun, pretty different than Deus Ex.
Yeah, definitely. So back then, Cody was making a run at ESA,
right?
Or he was basically doing runs on his channel, and I watched it and I was like, oh, RTS, it's super cool. I like Tiberian Sun, and I watched the run. I remember him doing like an 8 or 9 hour stream of just Tiberian Sun doing the Not campaign. I was like so fascinated. I was watching it on my second screen while playing Warcraft 3 fun maps with a friend of mine, and I just enjoyed it. And during ESA, they also showed it with Avox, like another runner, where they put away the speed limit. So, okay, so there's one technical thing with Tiberian Sun. If you put it on the second fastest speed limit, it is limited. But if you put it on the first one, which is the fastest, it will take as much CPU as your power computer provides. It is absolutely hilarious how the run looks, because you just click and suddenly the units are there, and they just speedrun everywhere. And they basically did a showcase like that at ESA. That category is kind of not really a thing. It was a cool showcase though, but it's kind of hilarious to see that game being run in 15 minutes if you just do everything correctly. But since then I knew about the run, and I said like I want to learn it, but I just couldn't get into it yet because I was like having other projects. I started Metal Gear Rising, I started Tomb Raider Anniversary, I started San Andreas, and I was like, okay, I want to stick to the games I have right now, and later on maybe go to Tiberian Sun. And 2 years ago, I started to play through RTS games on stream, and I picked also Tiberian Sun, played through it, and was like, hey, this was so much fun to play. Okay, it's time. Now that I have the game on my hard drive and I have everything prepared, let's learn the run. And then I started learning the run.
And when you came to the run, did it already? So I'm going to shout out the thing. I watched it, the VOD that you sent me, which was your Tiberian Sun Nod campaign RTA, and the thing that jumps out at me, and I assume the thing that would jump out at anyone as like the signature glitch of this run, is that it appears that you can just stick that filthy hand of Nod wherever you want to on the map, to the point that, you know, you're spawning rocket troopers behind people, you're spawning engineers, capturing buildings, etc. Was that trick already in the game when you picked it up?
Yes, it was already in the game when I picked it up. So back then, but that is interesting part. Cody didn't do that glitch back then because he did not run it in window mode. He just has, so how the trick works is you run it in window mode and then you skip the checkup for can you place a building there, yes or no, and you can just spawn it anywhere you want. And he was, if I remember correctly, he was running it in full screen mode, and he used a different trick where you can build a building behind the menu bar, like where you select your construction you want to do, and then you can use the arrow keys to move and place the building wherever you want. So that was like the backup, but the faster way is to use the alt tap glitch, because you can just point anywhere with your mouse. So Cody didn't do that, but he told me about it, and then I looked it up and I started to figure out how it works, and then I just basically learned to run that way. And it is the signature move, and it is hilarious just that you can spawn the buildings anywhere. The fun fact about that is you can do it in multiplayer as well. So if you play against someone who uses the retail version, because in the later versions it got fixed, you can just spawn buildings in his base, and you will be like, "What is happening? Why is there the enemy base here?" Like, it's pretty good.
Oh, so it's interesting. So the speed. This is a case where the speedrun version is a down patched version.
Yeah, exactly. But the thing is, you can still play in multiplayer with old and new versions. So if someone plays on the older version, he can do the trick, and the person on the newest version can't. It's kind of hilarious. So I remember I played it with a friend of mine. We started a multiplayer game, and we said, like, we figured out how to do the old tap glitch. That was before I even learned the speedrun. And we started to make a multiplayer game against each other. And it just ended with us placing buildings anywhere, and it took an hour until we finished. It was hilarious.
Good. I mean, I feel like that's the old-fashioned thing, and when you're playing multiplayer RTS, is that you just, especially like against your friends, and you're not particularly good at it, you just start like hiding buildings in places just so you don't lose the match, technically speaking. You know, it's the old classic maneuver. All right, let's start heading for the exit. So, folks, the way things are going to work is that I got a few exit questions as we get to the end of the script here. When I wrap that up, there will be Q&A. I think there was already one question earlier, which I'm going to use. I think, Magi put a question in there that I'm going to use for the Q&A portion. But before we get there, one of the things I like to do is add a little connective tissue to the interview series, which means I get a question from my previous guest for my next guest, and I carry that forward, so on and so forth. My previous guest was Konosumi. And Konosumi had this question. They didn't know it was going to be you, but they knew it was going to be a speedrunner. Question was, What speed game, doesn't have to be one of your speed games, what speed game do you feel deserves more recognition and why?
Yeah, there. Now I have to think of it because there are multiple games which pop up in my head. But I would say, yeah, I mean, it is kind of famous, but I would say it's Quake. Like, I still think that it deserves more love for being an old game, but being like kind of like one of the favorite or famous shooters in FPS, and with all the movement technique. It is great to watch. I just love to see that, and I always like to have it on a marathon because it's like this fast movement paced game that I like to enjoy, or which has got me into speedrunning as well when I see it, and I think like I want to try it, and I think it deserves more love. But there's also Fury when I think of it, because even though it is an indie game and it's been on GDQ now twice, I think it's still not as big and popular. Maybe I'm wrong, but I've seen only a couple of runners here and there, and I think it deserves some love as well because it's just so cool to watch it, since it's kind of like a Devil May Cry clone with boss fights, and I enjoy those.
Yeah, I think bringing up Quake is a good point, because I hear about Quake when you talk about like speedrunning history. Quake, of course, has a very central place as a game that you could share demos in. It facilitated the easy sharing of runs. That's Speed Demos Archive, famously rooted in Quake. But it doesn't there isn't a Quake block at most events. There isn't a Quake block in the way that there is Mario, Mega Man, or other platformers or other games. And so I kind of agree. I have found myself off stream playing more old first person shooters and just being like, wow, I could just do some more of these to watch them. So I definitely agree with that sentiment. That does mean that I do need from you a question for my next guest. I'm not going to tell you who it is just yet. They are, of course, a speedrunner. Question does not have to be about speedrunning. Could be about anything. I've had music questions, food questions, travel questions. Do you have a question for my next guest?
Yeah, I'm just wondering if someone asked it, but if you could, like, for the next person, like, if you could go back in time, what would you do differently to approach speedrunning? Like, how would you learn it? How would you approach streaming? Would you change something if you go for submissions, if you went for a marathon? Something like that. It would be interesting to see, like, what would people do differently from before, or what they learned through doing going for marathons, or through the process of learning through speedrunning.
Yeah, no, I think I've had some variation on that before, but I think it was targeted to a specific game, and I think adding in the flavor of streaming or marathon submissions, I think will be very interesting, because I think it'll also be very interesting for my next guest, who I think has had in the past year or two very, very good bit of success. So I'll definitely be curious to hear from them. Cool. I'm going to DM you who my next guest is. Right. I'll be curious if you reckon. I think I've seen more of this person around. Do you recognize this name? I DM'd it to you.
Yeah, I see it, but
they're known for these two series. And they've been at they ran at both AGDQ and SGDQ 2020. They got a run into the upcoming SGDQ 2021. I think they made partner in the past year too. So definitely excited to talk to them. I think they'll be on Thursday, and I'll be posting for I guess OverBoost regular fans. I'll be posting the schedule later today on when that interview will be and who that'll be with, so you can all look forward to that. We already talked a little bit about the future and the hopeful future in which more Deus Ex games come out. Are there games that you are looking forward to, that you're interested in playing?
I think maybe because I've become a parent, or maybe because I just going more and more into nostalgia. There are not many new games I'm looking forward to. Like, obviously, every time when I read that there's a new RTS game coming out, I'm always hyped. Like, the last time I had that was with Grey Goo, which was like side project, like an old game, like 2016, 2017, I think it came out. I had my fun with it and I enjoyed it. Last year, for example, it was with Command and Conquer with the remastered edition. I was like, oh yes, I'm looking forward to that, and immediately got it when it was available. But besides that, I'm not even sure what games are coming out this year, and I'm just like going through and like, oh hey, there's a new game, it looks interesting, okay, I'm gonna get it and play it. But it's not like that I'm really looking forward to one specific game. Like last year it was Command and Conquer, but this year I'm not even sure what's on the list.
No, I mean that's fair. I think it's also apt to point out too, and I find this to be the case for me as well, like getting older, is that rather than attaching myself to a particular series or a developer, that I'm getting better at articulating broadly what I want in a game, the kind of gameplay that interests me. And so that means that I'm not beholden to hoping that another Deus Ex comes out or something like that. I can look at indies and be like, this is my thing, or alternatively, this is not my thing. You know, I can also just very, very quickly say no. How about, who should, if you could put more eyeballs on someone automatically, if you could just say more people should watch so-and-so, who are some people you would shout out?
So, I mean, obviously I would shout out the Deus Ex community, because there are a couple of new runners who recently got into that, or since last year. That would be Koyotl, for example. He's a Russian speedrunner who's doing a lot of Deus Ex series, and he's like grinding every day, doing new breakthroughs in his personal best. So I'm looking really forward to that, and it's really cool to see him improve and watch him. Then there's also House Test from the Deus Ex community. He's doing a lot of Metal Gear now, but he started with Human Revolution as well. He started this year with speedrunning, and he's a cool guy. I enjoy watching him and found him through that as well. But besides that, I would also say the Command and Conquer community. Like there's Oil of a Great, for example, who's doing a lot of remastered speedruns of Command and Conquer, which has its own strategies and ways to approach the game. And I also would shout out to Katarev, who's basically famous for doing Tomb Raider speedruns. Back then he did Valkyria Chronicles, for example. That's how I found him. But he also does Okami with a Top Dog speedrun, which is basically get all the achievement, which is like an 8 to 9 hour runs, and it's incredible to see him have the stamina to go through that. It's just amazing.
Cool. No, I recently played Okami for the first time casually, and that is a very fun game.
Yeah.
Now, if people are looking for your stuff, I know, of course, you're busy. We've already gone over all the ways in which you are busy, with family and martial arts and your day job. But if people are looking for you and they want to see whatever fresh Heinki content comes their way, where should they be looking?
I mean, the most active part I am on is Twitch, so I still stream here and there whenever I have the time. Like even if it's just an hour, I just put the stream on. Stream for an hour. Even nowadays, sometimes a bit of more casual, because it's easier when my wife calls me or my daughter is screaming. I can immediately just go away. During a run, it would kind of suck if I just lose a PB because of that. But I wouldn't mind that either. So mostly on Twitch. On Twitter, I mostly actively post stuff, and my YouTube is just old highlights from my Twitch, because Twitch is deleting them. So I just basically post everything there. So that's all.
Shoutouts to the mess that not only is copyright law, but also the mechanisms by which private organizations enforce their shadow versions of copyright law. Now, of course, I posted those links in the chat if you're here with us live, so you can click through and get those from the chat. If you're watching or listening to this after the fact, check the show notes, check the YouTube description. You'll be able to find all the links. Please follow or subscribe or... actually, I guess those are the two verbs, because Twitch and Twitter is follow and YouTube is subscribe. The verbs never make any sense, but do those things. You should definitely do them. Heinki, thank you so much for giving me all this time. We definitely unearthed a lot of great stories. I really appreciate you sharing all those with me.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. Also, one shout out before I forget it, because I want to thank the person who got me into it, which is Xoneris, because I knew about the show and I hear it here and there when I'm working, but I didn't know that you can submit for it. And then you brought it to my attention. I was like, okay, well, sure, why not? So shout out to him as well.
I'm glad that worked out. I for a while, I had just been reaching out to people Because Speedrun Interview Podcast is not a new format of a show, but it's not necessarily something that I think is like a huge numbers driver. So, and I often worry that I kind of have, it can come across as like clout chasing or something like that. But at this point, I'm 50 episodes in, and like really, I just love watching speedrun VODs, discovering new games, new runs, finding out how people got into it. I find it to be really interesting, so I just kind of do it for myself at this point. But I'm glad that other people enjoy it. I certainly appreciate Zenaris, reaching out to you, letting you know about the forum. I had only made the forum about a month or two ago because another runner reached out to me, and they're like, "How can I like let you know I'm interested?" And like, in a discreet way, because people have DM'd me and been like, "I'm interested," but like, that can be, some people aren't going to be comfortable doing that. So having a forum, is a nice way of doing that. So certainly, if you are listening and you're a speedrunner and you'd want to talk to me and share your stories, I also link that forum in the show notes as well. So you can definitely check that out. Now, before we get to the Q&A to round out our time together, I do need one more thing from you, which is that I'm going to use a cheesy catchphrase like "Let's boost on out of here," and when I say that, I want you to give me your best rocket engine noise.
Jesus Christ, how does a rocket engine sound?
I mean, that's you're the artist. This is your interpretation.
Okay. I'll think of something.
Folks, thank you so much for listening. Let's boost on out of here. Perfect. That was very good. I really like that. Especially, I might have to like make a GIF of that or something, or a WebM, I guess, to get the audio in there as well. Or I could clip it, I guess. Okay, so that was excellent, folks. If you have questions for Heinki, we are on the front page for another 10 minutes or so here. Happy to get as many questions in. And I know Magi already put a question in, which is a very good question. What is the best Red Alert cinematic? Magi seems to believe that it's the Tim Curry space one, but I'm going to let you pick. You don't have to say it's the Tim Curry space one.
I mean, I think it's the one at the end where you see the rocket going into the station, the satellite station, and he's just like, "No!" It's so good. It's so bad that it's amazing. I love to watch that. So if it's that one, yes, that's really great. And then later on, there's Kane just doing his speech, being a cyborg, and then suddenly the Tiberian rocket is coming up. But it's so good. Like when I was casually playing it, I had to hold myself back so many times from laughing because back then it was amazing. It was cool, definitely. But kind of, if you look back at it, it's just so funny to watch. It's so hilarious in certain acting and what is even happening.
Yeah, the all of the acting and directing, especially I feel like Tiberian Sun and Red Alert 2. Red Alert 3 also is good, but I feel like they were even more in on the joke. Like they knew what they were doing. They knew what they were doing in Red Alert 3. I mean, they knew that too in Red Alert 2, but like there's definitely there's more self-seriousness, I would argue, in Red Alert 2 than 3. But both are great. So I didn't actually ask a best controller question because it seemed like all your speedruns were on keyboard. Do you have any opinions about keyboard setup, binds? Like, are you a big mechanical keyboard person? Walk us through that.
So I also use a mechanical keyboard. I really like the feeling of when you're pressing down the buttons. I really like to do that.
What color switch? Do you have a color? Are you the reds or the blues or?
I don't even know. I think it's the default ones.
Me
which
neither, like, buddy.
Yeah, but it's basically doing a lot of clacking sounds. So I actually am thinking of getting the silent ones because my daughter, whenever she's sleeping next to me and I'm chatting with people, she wakes up from the clacking sounds and starts screaming. So I think I need to switch that. But besides that, when I think of configuration, I mostly, like for Deus Ex 1, for example, I changed the key bindings thanks to Labekak, who is like an old Deus Ex runner. He gave me back then his setup, and his setup was really cool for the speedrun because it just gave you additional key bindings and late them differently so you can do certain tricks easier, and that is what I do. But the same for most games, when I think of Human Revolution, since I had already in mind, okay, I'm gonna do it at marathons, so I try to stick to the default settings. So whenever I just pick up a PC, I can just immediately start doing a run without worrying about I need to load my setup, I need to change the keys, and so on. But yeah, I think that would be it when it comes to the keyboard setup.
No, it's really interesting, I think, especially with older games, and older games where you have weird engine-specific tricks.
Yeah.
You know, and you've already talked that you're able to map them. Some games can be difficult to remap as well. But definitely, here's a question. I've not tried to speedrun Deus Ex, but if we're going to do weird keyboard speedrun questions, do you have any speedruns that necessitate the use of the numpad?
I mean, all Deus Ex games are used for the numpad.
Okay.
Yeah, because of you have the hacking devices where you need to put the codes in. And the easiest way to put them in is using the numpad, because you can use both hands to immediately put in the correct code, and it's just way faster than using the one above your normal letter keys. So that is what you basically use them for. And also, maybe my setup is a bit weird, but in Deus Ex 1 you can have multiple setups for quick saving and quick loading. And I have 2 of them on the numpad, because one is the so-called glitchy save, which you use to eliminate a script from executing. And if you accidentally do that during a run, it can happen that you soft lock. So I try to have it as far away as possible from the other keys so that I don't accidentally press on it. And yeah, that is basically what I have on the numpad.
No, that's good. Well, chat is failing me with questions here, so I'm going to ask one of the questions that I ended up leaving out of the main script, which is, there are a lot of really cool. All right, here we go. Magi gave another one. Do you have experience with System Shock and System Shock 2? Are they just Deus Ex games?
I haven't played them actually. I have them in my list though, because people always compare them, and the Twitch team we have called 0451 is basically how it started. Like, we look through the games which have that code at the first door frame. It became like the thing. Like, System Shock has it, Deus Ex has it. Other games have it. I think in one Resident Evil, maybe they have it, or I'm mistaken. But there's even a page which Suicide Machine made where he listed all the games which have the 0451 code in, and there are many. I know that. I remember that.
Interesting. I had never heard of that before, but I'm very intrigued now. I'll have to look up that list. That's cool.
I'll try to find it right now.
I've definitely run into Suicide Machine in a few places. Although the funniest was when I started speedrunning this old FPS called Dire Nakatomi Plaza, and Sui was a moderator for it without ever having done a run. And like, I submitted a run, and immediately run was verified. Suddenly I was moderator. Which, like,
congratulations.
Props to Sui. Like, obviously, I'm sure Sui was waiting for someone to come along to, because you want a moderator to be someone who runs the game. So yeah, the curse has been passed on. That's exactly right. Do you have a favorite Deus Ex trick? And I'm going to ask that broadly. You can pick from any of the games: Human Revolution, Mankind Divided, the original. What is your favorite piece of tech? Because there's so many tricks.
Yeah. My most favorite, I think, is still the super jump in Deus Ex 1, which is basically just go into the game options, go out while you have an augmentation on, and it will just multiply, because the script is always applying the augmentation over and over, and that's why you can do the high jumps. I think this is a very easy trick, and it's the most hilarious one, because we can break the game by just jumping over obstacles or walls or anything the game is putting in the way, and we don't care. We just we just jump over it and we're done. Or like in the old route, where you just jump on the tower to talk with the NPC, which was placed there so you don't find him before doing the mission. It's kind of hilarious.
No, that is a good one. And also, especially because that particular trick enables a lot of other funny things too, like finding people who are just loaded in places you're not supposed to get to. Like, isn't there like the guy on top of the tower?
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
that
exactly.
is the one.
Yeah.
Or like on one, they did the mapping wrongly. So if you jump behind the building, there's like a poster of like some face clinic operation thing, and it's completely filled with that. And when I found it the first time, I was like, "Excuse me, but why is that there? Like, what is going on? Like, why is the wallpaper posted there?" But it's just UVM mapping issue they did in the game, so it's kind of hilarious.
All right. Well, we're just about wrapped up, which means I do have one final question for you. I don't know how many viewers are with us here on my channel versus how many are on the front page, but who can I raid? Who should we go raid right now? Do you have a target for me?
Who should we raid? Let me check quickly. Huh? I see. It's kind of funny. We were talking about Suicide Machine, and he's actually streaming. He's not doing a run, but he's doing Morrowind right now.
All right. We'll cue that up.
Yeah, but besides that, there's Sarah Def, who's doing Dishonored, any percent runs.
I mean, it's your choice. I'm gonna give you the choice here. What do you want to?
Okay, let's go to Suicide Machine, because he's one of the first friends and person I met since speedrunning, and that was in 2013. So I know him for 8 years, and he's a good friend I met through the internet. So
all right,
let's go over there.
Well, I'm gonna cue that up now. Get that going. Thank you again so much for all this time. Hopefully, I might see you around in the future at events when we all start going to events again. And just have a great rest of your day, and then I guess enjoy the time, enjoy the time of being a new parent. Seems like an exciting thing. So hopefully all goes well for you.
Thank you very much, and once again, thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. Take care.
All right, bye bye.